With how expensive PCs have become in the current market climate, I wanted to take a look at whether it would be possible to build, just something like a 10,000 Rand gaming computer. And I wanted to start out with the old site Evetech. Now, Evetech aren't really what they were at one point, but, they're still a usable site in some ways. I don't like all of the AI, but that's not what this video is about. So if you're a South African, can you build a 10,000 Rand PC? And what I would do, if I were to build a 10,000 Rand PC right now. Let's center this window here. Take a look at the options. So not a ton of budget options in terms of graphics cards. They have, the very entry-level stuff like the GT 710, which these days isn't usable for gaming anymore. And then the bare minimum, I would say, is the ASRock A380. You will be able to play games on it, but there's a ton of games that you can't play or that you can't play at any reasonable settings. Then my winner for the ultra budget choice in 2026 would be the 3056 gigabyte. This Storm variant is quite nice because it's very small and it doesn't require any external power, so it runs off of under 100 watts, which is very useful for a budget build like this, because you often can use, as you will see in this video, you often can use stock power supplies that come with cases. Of course, the graphics card I would recommend at this, at the ultra budget is the ARC B580, because it's just such a massive step up for, not that much more money. Yes, you go from 3,500 to 5,800, but that extra two and a bit thousand Rand is going so much further in what you get. But for this video, sticking to 10,000 Rand, I'm going with the RTX 3056 gigabyte. Now, this card will be useful at 1080p and sometimes at 2K at 1440p, but don't expect to push high refresh rates in AA or AAA games, and don't expect it to, do any meaningful ray tracing. Okay, next up we have the processor. Now, we unfortunately have to go for the cheapest processor we can find on Evetech, which in this case is the Ryzen 5 3400G. Now, this is a Zen 3 CPU from, at this point, a decade ago, maybe more, but in many ways it is still quite a useful CPU. It is probably the only quad-core CPU you can buy on Evetech these days, and of course I wouldn't want to use a quad-core CPU in 2026, but at the 10,000 Rand price point, because of the price of RAM, you don't have much of a choice if you want to stick to that price point. And again, as with the B580 as opposed to the 3050, the Ryzen 7 5700 is so much better than the 3400G for, in this case, twice the price, but still only 3,000 Rand, that it just makes no sense to take the 3400G in any situation other than you have to stick to 10,000. So what I'm saying is, it makes so much more sense to save up an extra 5,000 Rand just for those two parts, because you're going from an entry-level 1080p gaming PC to a mid-level 2K gaming PC. And yes, it's 33% more expensive if you look at the overall price, but it still isn't that much money for a computer at this point. But for this price point, the quad-core 3400G, it only pulls 65 watts. The graphics card only pulls 75 watts, so very low wattage system. It does have integrated graphics, which we won't use in this case, but the option is there. Then the motherboard, Evetech are only selling two AM4 motherboards at this point, and we would look at the it's just a classic old DDR4 motherboard, the MSI A520M-A Pro. I've used it many times in many builds. It's a reliable motherboard, nothing wrong with it. It's not good per se, but it's fine. It does what it needs to. It only has 2 DIMM slots. It only has, I think, 1 NVMe slot, and it only has 1 PCI Express. I think it might be a 4th gen, and only has 1 PCI expansion slot. But what they did well is they put the expansion slot above the Express slot. So what that means is you can actually put something like a network card or a sound card or an extra NVMe card into this above the graphics card, so that because it's a small form factor motherboard, it actually makes sense because the graphics card isn't going to block that extra expansion card. So that's something that they did that was quite smart, and because I use this motherboard so much when building PCs, something that I really appreciate. It does have some USB 3 slots, but unfortunately no USB-C. It's a bit too old. It is PCIe 3, not 4, and it doesn't have Wi-Fi. But at this price point, that's to be expected, coming in at 1,250 Rand. Next up is the case. Now, usually I wouldn't recommend this case, just because it's just a stock black office case. But I think it makes sense for a build like this, given the budget constraint, because it comes with a 400 watt power supply. It is just a standard power supply, just an OEM unit, but it makes sense for this. And the case is, it's nothing amazing to look at, but it's not offensive either. I would just pop this under my desk and forget about it. This PC is going to be so low wattage, it's going to run so quiet. You can just forget it. You can forget this PC even exists. So that case is just a standard ATX case, and yeah, it's fine. It's okay. Memory. Now this is where it gets tricky at this price point, because just like 4 years ago, you could get twice this much memory for this price. And it's very tough to recommend 8 gigs of RAM in 2026, but at the current climate, if you want to stick to 10,000 Rand, there is no other choice, because the 16 gig kit, which isn't even 2 sticks, which is still just 1 stick, is almost twice as much, and that just blows our budget. So again, it makes much more sense to go for a 15,000 Rand PC, even if you are going DDR4, because you get so much more out of it. This RAM is good RAM. It's Clev RAM. I've got some of this in my system. Well, I've got the cloud ones, the RGB ones, but Clev RAM is good. This is Clev Bolt X. It is 32 mega transfers, and it is DDR4. Now, this is the one part that I'd say is not going to last a long time in terms of the upgrade path. You do get 1 more DIMM slot in the motherboard that we chose, so I would save up for another stick and at least get to 16 gigs of RAM as soon as I can. CPU cooler is not necessary because AM4 CPUs came with coolers, so we'll skip this. Storage, again, we only really have one choice, the cheapest one. We can only really get a 512 gig Hexemi SSD. 4 years ago, this was 700 Rand. And man, it's just crazy how we aren't getting new parts at these prices. These are parts that have been around for such a long time. I remember being at Rage in Joburg, in South Africa, obviously. And I bought one of these, exactly the same one, for 700 Rand. Now it's twice that price, more than twice that price, and it's 4 years later. Crazy times, man. But it's the only choice we really have for this build. Not the fastest drive by any means, but it's fine, especially for this PC. It's going to be fine for what this PC needs to do. Power supply, luckily we can skip this, which saves us a bit of money. In the long run, it makes sense to buy something a little bit more rated, I guess. Something like, I would probably go at the least for, I would do this deep cool unit, because I have one of these and I've used it for 6 years at this point continuously, and it's not given me any issues. But even going for this cheapest GameX unit, still better than using a proprietary OEM unit. But for this build, we don't have to worry about it right now. Peripherals, I'm not going to get into chairs and screens and all of that. You can decide that on your own. I don't include that in the build price of the PC. To me, those are extra things. You can see it how you want to. For me, I don't include it. But I mean, they do have some nice options if you want to take a look at them. And for 1,800 rand now, you can get a gaming rate 24-inch monitor, which is not bad. That's one thing that I will say the market has actually become cheaper with, right? Is screens. I mean, under 2,000 rand for a 27-inch IPS monitor at 100 hertz. When I was growing up, that would be 5,000 rand. So at least there's a little bit of balance to the market in some areas. Well, to be fair, when I was growing up, Full HD hadn't existed yet, and screens were like 60 hertz at the most. So it was a different time. We were playing Half-Life, but screens are quite cheap. I will say that. Keyboard and mice. There are so many options these days compared to when I was young. When I started gaming, man, this is making me feel old. When I started gaming, clickety clack. What do you call them? What do you call these? Mechanical keyboards weren't a thing. They just, they probably existed, but they weren't the common method of being a keyboard. Keyboards were just, normal membranes. But anyway, there's a ton of choices. I've used one. I purchased one of these for my wife a few years ago, and no worries, it was pretty good. Felt she played Hogwarts on it. Decent keyboard. For around 500-600 rand, you can get a pretty good keyboard now. Mouse, I have used this Lorgar brand. I think is Canyon's gaming brand. They seem okay, but I've never used anything. And then this mouse I bought for my wife as well. 300 rand, and it's a fantastic mouse. A little bit small if your hands are bigger like mine, but really good mouse, good to use, and great sensor on it as well. You can even use it for FPS games. Headsets, I mean, just use your head on this one. I used this one on my PS5, and it's pretty good actually for the price. It might be a bit different one, but it's something like that. It's a Turtle Beach, and it's decent. So again, for 500 bucks, you can get something decent. Mouse pads are mouse pads. I'm not going to look at these. It's like 200 bucks. And then gaming chairs, I'm not a big fan of. I always buy office chairs, but I don't know too much about them either. So yeah, let's get to the overview. We're looking at 10,793 rand, but I see down here professional PC assembly is checked. Now I'm going to uncheck this. I purchased a PC from Evetech 4 or 5 years ago now, and they built the PC for me. I didn't pay for that. I didn't want them to do that because I wanted to build it for a video. But they damaged the PC so much in some parts because over tightening and putting cable ties where they didn't need to go. So in my opinion, not to slander Evetech or anything, I don't like them building my PCs for me because they're way too aggressive with it, and I think they are in a hurry to do it. Again, just my opinion. I don't like them doing it. It's up to you. If you want them to build your PC, you can, but I always recommend people learn how to do it themselves. It's good to know how to build a PC, and it's really not that difficult. And there are a ton of videos on YouTube that show you how to do it. But anyway, the grand total is now right around 10,100 Rand. This says minimum PSU 500 watt. I think they're just guessing at that because our CPU pulls 65 watts. Our GPU pulls 75 watts at the most. CPU 65 at the most. Our RAM pulls a couple of watts. Our storage pulls a couple of watts. We have one fan, if we even have a fan. I'm not even sure the case comes with a fan. So that's under like 250 watts. I'm not sure where the rest is coming from. I'm not sure why they're saying you need 500 watts. Maybe it's just maybe that's like a minimum for them, a minimum threshold, because anything under that is a little bit low for gaming PCs usually. But a low-powered, low-thermal system like this really doesn't need that much. Now, I would recommend, if you have the money, buy a proper power supply, of course. But if you're going strictly on budget, it'll be fine. You don't have to worry about it too much. So that's the PC. Just to run through it again, the 3050 Storm, 6GB, RTX capable, but not a good RTX card. The 3400G, 4-core CPU there. I think it's a 4-thread as well. The MSI A520M A Pro, basic budget motherboard, but it's pretty good for what it is. The Evetech base standard chassis with a 400 watt power supply. Just a standard PC case, nothing fancy. Just stick it under your desk and forget about it. Not sure if it comes with a fan, but it probably should. Memory, unfortunately, we only have 8 gigs of memory there. We do go with the 3200 mega transfers Clev Bolt X. Upgrade that as soon as you can. And lastly here we have storage, the Hixsemi E100N M.2 SATA SSD, which is just a standard SATA SSD, 512 gigabytes. You'll want to upgrade that at some point as well. So that's it for the build. I think given the price constraint, it's a decent gaming system. Let me put it this way, there's nothing you can't play. But there are a lot of games you probably can't play very well. But if you're happy with low settings in some games, sticking to HD, it's going to be a good gaming PC. We will check out how it performs on some games. So stick with me and let's see how it does. Let's do it. So let's see how the 3050 based 10,000 Rand system does with gaming, at this point, relatively modern games. These games are from a couple of years ago, but, still relatively recent. And we are running 1080p medium settings in Plague Tale Requiem. So this game, was, when it came out, a benchmark for visuals. I think it still is, and for more difficult to run games. The PC is doing relatively good with this. A 3400G, a 3056 gigs. This PC does have more RAM than the one that we were looking at, but it is the closest comparison that was suitable. Getting around 55 FPS right now, average of 51. So it's running quite well in this game. Like I said, for 1080p, this PC will still be usable in many games. Moving on here to Alan Wake 2, and this is running at medium high, 1080p. little bit more difficult to run now. We are looking at an average of 43 FPS. Beautiful game. I think it looks really nice. The art direction is really strong. I haven't played it yet. I am curious to play it. I kind of want to. But yeah, it's not doing particularly well, but there is space to drop the settings, and you could always go 720p. I probably wouldn't recommend it, but you do have that option. We are looking at around, between 35 and 50 FPS at the most, with an average of 42. So not what I would say is a good result, but it is a somewhat playable result. Very high on most settings here, almost all, and Assassin's Creed Valhalla, we are looking at around 50 to 60 FPS with an average right now of 76. So, at 1080p, there are a lot of games that are, somewhat modern like this that will run actually pretty well. This is running really well. Sticking around that 65 to 70 sort of territory on this, and an average of 72. So very, very playable result. Moving on to control here, 1080p, high settings for the most part, medium settings in some areas, and medium ray tracing as well. Looking at 45, which is quite decent for, having enabled ray tracing with an average of 102. Pretty good results, actually. 35, it does drop a little bit in some areas, the average coming down as well. But it does seem to be between 35 and 60 with ray tracing enabled. I would play this without ray tracing and probably try to get closer to that 60 FPS mark. Now, a lot of people would buy a PC like this for a game like Counter-Strike 2. And Counter-Strike 2 and other esports games like it are good examples of not having to spend a ton of money on a PC to enjoy games. High graphics, some aliasing as well, and we are looking at an average of 101 with an FPS ranging between the 70s and 90s. So if you are into esports specifically, or racing games or such, you can get away with a PC like this, and you can still game and have a pretty good time. Not going to check out too many more here, but we'll check out Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk running at 1080p, what seems to be mostly medium and some high settings. This should push above 50s for the most part, getting an average of 55, an FPS right now of 45. It looks nice, I will say. It doesn't look bad at all. This is running with rain right now, so it's actually quite a good result. And we do get around 50 FPS, an average of 50 right now as well, with a 1% low of 30. So I would say this would be what I would consider to be a cinematic experience, where it's the FPS isn't so low that it feels laggy, but it's not high enough to be high refresh rate either. Very playable, but probably a little bit low for, most PC gamers. One of my favorite games ever, Far Cry 6. And this PC will be able to run Far Cry 6 at some pretty good settings, in my opinion. Probably at around high. We are looking at 1080p, high settings across the board. No reflections or anything like that. And we are looking at around 50 FPS, which is pretty good. An average of 59. The 1% low is a little bit low, and the 0.1% low is very low. A game like this, that CPU starts to bottleneck a little bit. Um, a game like this where visually it's a very impressive game, but it's very well optimized. But there's so much going on in the world that that CPU has to work a little bit harder than probably it is comfortable doing. But still, playing at around 50 FPS is not a bad experience. I would configure it in a way where I do get around 60 because it is quite a fast game, but definitely a very playable experience here. Moving on to Fortnite, another game that people would be interested in with a PC like this. Seems to be at low and performance in sort of territory settings, 1080p, and we are looking at 60 to 80 FPS with an average of 75. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but it does show that Fortnite is more than playable on this, and you could have a pretty good time playing it. We'll take a look at one last one here. I do want to take a look at a racing game. I think this is Forza Horizon 4 or 5. Everything at high, 1080p. Some settings set to medium, but for the most part high. And we are looking at about 70 to 90 FPS with an average of 77. Now, most recently, a new Forza game has come out, but this PC will be able to play that as well. Maybe not at these frame rates, maybe drop 10 to 15 frame rates there, but still, it will still be a console equivalent performance from the PC. I want to take a look at one last one. But I will say the PC has actually performed very well so far. We'll take a look at Red Dead Redemption 2, because I think these are the kinds of games that you're going to play with this PC if you do buy this. We are looking at a mixture between, ultra and medium, but for the most part it seems to be on the higher side at 1080p. And we are looking at around 50 FPS, which is, it's quite impressive. An average of 51. So I'm going to let the video run some more while we look at gameplay of Red Dead Redemption 2 and just say quite confidently that for 10,000 Rand, you can definitely game. This PC has actually somewhat impressed me today. I mean, yes, some of these games are older, but they're still a ton of fun. And, gaming really hasn't, this is still probably the best game anyway, so you could just play this. There are a few games you can play on this that it'll do really well, like your racing games, your Counter-Strikes, strategy games, stuff like that. The quad-core CPU does hold you back somewhat, but honestly it seems to actually be quite a good match for the 3050 6GB. Now, of course, some games do need a higher memory amount to unlock their best visual settings, like this game, for example, but this does not look bad. And at 1080p, I think this PC actually makes a lot of sense. So if your budget is strictly, 10,000 Rand, I think you can still compete in the market. And, you're buying older parts. You're buying parts that were new probably around a decade ago. But still, you're buying parts that can play games in 2026 and parts that still have a ton of value to them. And so it becomes a thing of, if you're happy to just game, this PC is still quite useful. I do expect that it would stutter at points and it would have some, gameplay lags or issues, but for the most part, I think it will be pretty okay. I don't know what this game is, probably Green Hell or something. But my point is that this PC for 10,000 Rand is very useful, and you can definitely still play games. I'm pretty impressed with it, to be honest. And it kind of makes me wonder why I spent so much money on a system with a 5070 when, something like this yes, it's only HD, and yes, you can't run everything at full graphics, but you definitely can still game. So you really don't need the most expensive thing. Sometimes it's just about playing a few games with your friends. And especially if you're an esports gamer, you don't really need much more than this, to be honest with you. I would look at more RAM. I would look at least a 6-core CPU, but strictly speaking, it games. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I do agree that this is well below the minimum viable PC for going forward. But at the price points, I think it's going to be difficult to beat it unless you do go second hand. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. What would you have done differently? Do consider that this is only for Evetech specifically. I'll take a look at doing a woodware one, maybe doing some other shops. But as far as the 10,000 Rand Evetech PC goes, I'm pretty happy with it. And hopefully you'll agree. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.